Former U.S. Senator Mike Gravel has passed away. He was 91 years old. Gravel represented Alaska as a Democrat in the Senate for 12 years, from 1969 to 1981. While there, he made a name for himself with his outspoken opposition to the Vietnam War, to the military draft, and to President Nixon's war on drugs. But he was most famous for his one-man filibuster in 1971. He broke down into tears while reading 4,100 pages from the Pentagon Papers to enter them into the congressional record.
One may respond that we made such a sacrifice to preserve freedom and liberty in Southeast Asia. One may respond that we sacrifice ourselves on the continent of Asia so that we will not have to fight a similar war on the shores of America. One can make these arguments only if he has failed to read the Pentagon Papers.
After losing the 1980 Alaska Democratic Senate primary, he didn't retire and become a K Street lobbyist like so many of his colleagues. But he later ran for president twice, slamming our endless wars and condemning hawkish Democrats and Republicans alike in the process. He continued to speak truth to power. So tonight, Senator Gravel, rest in power.
And former Democratic Senator for Alaska, Mike Gravel, has passed away at the age of 91. Now,
near the end, I'm the fellow that ended the draft. I'm the one that stopped the nuclear testing in the North Pacific. I'm the one that brought about the Alaska pipeline. I'm the one that released the Pentagon Papers and had to go to the Supreme Court because Richard Nixon was trying to throw me in jail. That's what I did 28, 29, 30 years ago. That was leadership then. And I was excoriated by the media at that point. I was a loose cannon. Well, right today, I've had the good fortune to live this long. And people look back and say, my God, were you a courageous leader? Well, that's the leadership you'll get when I become president of the United States. Now, can the American people stand that kind of leadership? That remains to be seen. So obviously that didn't happen, of course. And he's certainly.
But let's maybe bring up the topic of the day, which is the Green New Deal.
How much will this cost? That's unclear. How will we pay for it? Unknown.
It's not realistic.
Because there's no way to pay for it.
It's immoral.
The younger generation now tells me how tough things are. Give me a break. No. I have no empathy.
I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons.
I think Medicare for all is one of the possible paths.
So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. This was a little controversial in San Francisco.
He did ask you yes or no. Would you support free college for all?
I am not for free four-year college for all, no.
Human beings are being killed as I speak to you tonight, killed as a direct result of policy decisions we as a body have made.
This approach of war on drugs has not succeeded. We've spent billions of dollars on it.
And we fill up our prisons to the point where we're the embarrassment of the world. We're supposed to be a democracy. We've got more people in prison, 2.3 million people in prison.
We spend more as a nation on defense than all the rest of the world put together.
This whole nation should be a sanctuary for the world. I'm ashamed as an American to be building a fence on our southern border. That's not the America that I fought for.
Our soldiers died in Vietnam in vain. You can now, John, go to Hanoi and get a Baskin-Robbins ice cream cone.
Why do they hate us so in so many places around the world?
Because we kill so many people wantonly.
Oh, Joe, I'll include you too. You have a certain arrogance. You want to tell the Iraqis how to run their country.
And we can get off of gasoline in 5 years, and we can get off of carbon in 10 years. All we got to do is want to do it.
Just plain get out. It's their country. They're asking us to leave, and we insist on staying there. The military-industrial complex not only controls our government, lock, stock, and barrel, but they control our culture.
It's time to make some waves for change. I'm Mike Gravel, and I'm running for president.
Time ago, the people are not dumb. Not at all.
Not at all.
They're very bright and knowledgeable. All they got to do is focus on the issue. And so it's so tough to make a living today and raise a family and all of that, that they don't have time to reflect. But now if you put things in front of them, they'll begin to reflect on it. Now, no question, we got 25% of the people that may be dumb as fence posts. I don't know. But the base of Trump is there. But then you got 75% of the people that are open.
Yeah, they're just misinformed a lot of the time by cable news, misinformation.
The problem is mainstream media. Mm-hmm. Who owns mainstream media? It's the military-industrial complex. And they sneak at best. They're the ones that are making the case that that Iran is a threat to us. Mm-hmm. Iran's not a threat to us, never has been. We're the ones that damaged them when we took out Mossadegh, when they had a representative government. So no, but why today we're moving the fleet in to threaten and scare the leadership of Iran. Will they react? I hope not. When I was in Iran and was talking and made a couple of speeches and spoke to the intelligence community elements of it, I said, hey, just be patient. We're very immature in what we're doing as global imperialists. Just be patient. And, there's the old saying that what can the powerful do? Whatever they want. What can the people who don't have power? They suffer what they have to. And so that's where we're stuck. We are the global imperialists. And
one issue would you like to see the Democratic Party in general move on? What issue would that be? What do you think the Democratic Party is most wrong about right now?
Well, the one issue that I would be very fond of is single-payer health care. The Obamacare package was really a subsidy to the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And they've sold it. It's in great detail, and so. But there's no reason why we can't have single payer health care. I avail myself of veterans, the VA, and also sometimes Medicare, since I have both. But there's no reason why the entire American population should have Medicare, or the equivalent of the VA. And it costs money. But then I was just pointing out to you that we got the Defense Department that is using up $3 trillion. Well, we can pay for Medicare for everybody, and we can wipe out the school debt, and we can pay whatever. So the money's there. We don't have to raise taxes. Very much so. Very much so.
What would you do if you were president?
If I was president, I would copy Portugal and decriminalize all drugs. And they've done this successfully. It lowered the crime rate. It lowered the rate of people getting hooked. And it provided a process where people, if you need a drug to sustain yourself, then get a prescription, go see a doctor, and get the prescription filled, and then go back to work at your job, rather than criminalize it where you put them in jail, where they commit crimes in order to get the money for the drug. It fails, as it failed with Prohibition. And so now Prohibition gave us the mafia, and what this one has given us is a prison population that's the embarrassment of the world.
Like I said, one of the most progressive folks running for Congress. You also oppose NAFTA. You're in favor of college tuition being borne by the federal government rather than
everybody gets it.
Yeah,
and
so
I would like, the idea would be to do like Finland. We would pay people to go to school.
Well, that's super interesting. So let's talk about that for a second.
Biden, a centrist. He's not a centrist. He's a conservative. He's on the right. We have moved since Bill Clinton, the center over towards the right. Now, what we've got to do is bring it back to the center so we can recognize a centrist. But Biden and many of these people who claim to be centrist, they're not centrist. They don't have an idea what's happened historically. And if you don't know history, you're going to repeat it. And that's what's going on today. The extreme, not extreme. Is it extreme to want peace and to make an effort to get peace? Is that extreme? Is Tulsi Gabbard, who's got the courage to stand up to Obama on military policy, is that extreme? Is it extreme for Bernie Sanders to want single-payer health care? Is that extreme? You know, who are the beneficiaries of this extremism? It's the people, and they cry out for these solutions. The problem is the structure of government doesn't permit that to happen because our government was sold to the elites back at the convention in 1787 and 88. And the change that needs to take place, see, they purposefully kept the people out of making laws because they knew the people would not tolerate slavery. So they wanted to protect slavery, and they did. And
the former presidential candidate and Democratic U.S. Senator from Alaska died this weekend at the age of 91. In the 70s, he was fiercely opposed to the Vietnam War and the draft. He played a seminal role in the release of the Pentagon Papers. That's the 7,000 pages of top-secret documents outlining the secret history of the U.S. war in Vietnam. The leak would end up helping take down President Nixon, help end the Vietnam War, and lead to a major victory for press freedom. While the papers were leaked to the New York Times and the Washington Post by Dan Ellsberg, Gravel spearheaded a one-man push to get the pages of the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record so that it would become public record, then anyone could read them and publish them.
I know of nothing in our history to equal it for extent of failure and extent of loss in all aspects of the term. We can people, human beings, are being killed as I speak to you tonight, killed as a direct result of policy decisions we as a body have made. Arms are being severed. Metal is crashing through human bodies because of a public policy. This government, one may respond that we made such a sacrifice to preserve freedom and liberty in Southeast Asia. One may respond that we sacrifice ourselves on the continent of Asia so that we will not have to fight a similar war on the shores of America. One can make these arguments only if he has failed to read the Pentagon Papers. That is the terrible truth of it all. Doubt that these are agonizing times for America. Can anyone doubt that this nation is being torn apart by a war that sears its conscience? A terrible shadow of suspicion is across the land. Suspicion that we have made a terrible mistake, that we have spent lives and wealth in pursuit of an unworthy goal. I did not seek these papers. When they were offered, I accepted them. I have reviewed the papers in my possession and read much of the material. It is a remarkable work, to say the least. Remarkable for what it says about those chiefly responsible for managing our efforts in Southeast Asia in 1967. Black marketeers and grand-scale dope pushers.
Someone who
First, put them on tape, and I'm reading.
Okay. It gets better than that. I read for an hour. Now, here again, I'm dyslexic. There's no way on God's green earth I'm going to read it, but I'm reading it. Now, keep in mind, I hadn't slept for about 3 or 4 days, and so I'm reading, and I break out sobbing. It's about 12 o'clock at night, and I am sobbing, and I can't get control of myself. Here's what was going through my head. A journalist, one of the networks next morning, oh, this was a bizarre occurrence the night before. You know, Gravel was very bizarre. He cried. And so what I was sobbing over, I had been to Walter Reed a month or more before to walk around, and I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it emotionally to look at the wounded. And so I can handle macro problems, but not micro. And so lo and behold, I kept saying to myself, my God, I love my country. My country is committing immoral acts. We're killing human beings. There's no reason for it. And I'm sobbing. And of course, as a dyslexic, I'm reading rote. You know, I can follow the words in front of me. So Rothstein comes up to me. He says, in the understatement here, he says, Senator, I think you've lost it. And I'll keep sobbing. He says, and then he goes back, and I try to get a hold of myself, and I can't. And so he comes back. He says, Senator, why don't you put it in a record? And then I sobered up immediately and said, oh, yes, I got power. I'm the chairman of this committee. So I move and ask unanimous consent to put all these papers that I was going to read at the record, to put them in a record automatically. Bang, they're in the record. That's how it officially got into the record of the United States of America.
Well, there, unlike most politicians, has an actual record of being on the right side of history.
So beyond the incredible Twitter dunks written by his staff, who is Mike Gravel and what was his career like? Because this makes the endorsement, while perhaps something the establishment will scoff at, substantively deeply important when voters are making their decisions. Mike Gravel was a heroic senator on issues of war and peace. Gravel is best known for reading the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record at a subcommittee hearing in 1971. Those documents expose lies from the White House to the public and Congress about the U.S. role in Vietnam leading up to and during the war. The then freshman senator read 4,100 pages until past 1 a.m. when, with tears in his eyes and no other senators left in the room, he established unanimous consent and entered the pages into the record. It's incredibly powerful stuff, and even more powerful to watch, especially with the context of how many young American men and Vietnamese civilians and soldiers had died so needlessly.
You have wide latitude as a senator or a congressperson to release documents by reading them into the record. You cannot, you have basically an immunity for whatever you say on the, as long as it's not a foul of the, you know, the rules of the House and the Senate in terms of like personal insults and whatnot. But you have wide berth to do these, to say these things, and by reading the Pentagon Papers into the record in the Senate, what he did was essentially sort of a de facto declassification. Would you describe it that way, Matt? And made it possible for reporters and everyone else to essentially examine those papers, reprint them. They didn't actually reprint the papers. What they did is they reprinted the record that he included into the Senate record. Exhausting, the idea of reading 4,000 pages.
I mean, I think it took him into what, 2 a.m, something like that.
Oh, it was insane.
Yeah, and he broke down because he lived a life of anti-imperialist, anti-war passion, and I mean, I think that that's how he'll be remembered, as somebody who was not singularly focused, but incredibly focused on, you know, one of the great horrors perpetuated by mega powers like the United States and, you know, mostly us for the past years. And he was somebody who was, I think, you know, incredibly dedicated in that project, and that's how he will be remembered.
And what
that the reading of the Pentagon Papers barely happened, and Mike Gravel and Daniel Ellsberg worked together to make sure that he got a copy. It was like, I can't remember the specifics of it, but it barely happened. But it was so powerful to enter this like devastating information, which was essentially that one, the war had expanded, right? It expanded to Cambodia and Laos, not just Vietnam, but that also it was not going well. They were losing. The United States was losing, and yet we were still there. I believe that that was some part of the revelation, and Congress wouldn't have heard about it. You know, they would have seen it in the news, sure, but this entered in public record. The American people throughout history will know and can look back at that moment when he took that stand and when he read that in public. So again, these heroic acts that make you sort of the loose cannon, make you the weirdo, makes Bernie Sanders oh, you were an independent. Yeah, he was an independent. That allowed him to rise above some of your partisan BS and actually, stand for something.
Yeah, and like, how much longer would it have taken? How many more lives would have been lost? Like, these are obviously incredibly important questions. And it's not to say that, like, any politician, especially a politician who's been in the public figure for literally decades, the public eye for literally decades, not to say that we agree with everything they did, clearly. But we can admire, especially stances like this that are so consequential when it comes to war and American imperialism and all that.
That moved by the thought of human suffering and descriptions of people being massacred. That is someone who you absolutely want in our government, because now you look to the US Congress and you see basically what are essentially, for lack of a better word, sociopaths who are cold. They don't care about the suffering of millions. They don't care how the actions of our government impact people around the globe or at home. So, to see someone who genuinely cared to the point where it brought him to tears, that is such a rarity in US government. And it's why Mike Gravel is really one of a kind. Now, Mike Gravel, the military draft might never have ended. Gravel spent 5 months as a one-man wrecking ball trying to topple conscription for the war and succeeded in filibustering the extension of the draft to death in 1971, partly by reading the Pentagon Papers. Gravel played an important role in establishing what became Alaska's permanent fund dividend program, a kind of universal basic income funded off of Alaska's fossil fuel exploitation, and he had earlier experienced a meteoric rise to the Alaskan State Legislature speakership, where he presided over, among other things, the creation of a rural high school program that let indigenous kids get local education instead of being shipped off sometimes thousands of miles to other parts of the country. This doesn't make him a saint, of course. Gravel was indeed a fierce fighter for fossil fuel interests in the Senate in the 1970s and was not immune to fundraising off them and all the sleazy pay-for-play shenanigans that came with that. Yet, ironically, his stubbornness on the matter unwittingly spurred one of the major executive actions of environmental protection in presidential history, and by 2007, he had shifted dramatically on the issue, running on what was then an aggressive climate platform to prevent what he later called planetary suicide. So I love this because throughout the years, you see Mike Gravel become even more radicalized than he already was. And someone like that, like I think looking at his flaws and how he was a fighter for fossil fuels is really important, because it shows that you can convince people so long as they actually have a moral core. And Mike Gravel had a moral core. He had strong convictions. And not only that, one thing that I really admire about Mike Gravel, Mike Gravel, his legacy is just incredible. And the impact that he's had on me has been profound. I think that in 2020, he had one of the best platforms I've ever seen, offering reparations not only to Black Americans, but Iraqi citizens who were brutalized by our, imperialism. Everything about him, I really respect him, and he will be sorely missed. His integrity, his passion, his care for humanity, and desire to prevent suffering. It's so rare, and I really want to celebrate people who fought for the right things. So having said that, we're going to leave
top tier ones. They made statements. Oh, Joe, I'll include you too. You have a certain arrogance. You want to tell the Iraqis how to run their country. I got to tell you, we should just plain get out. Just plain get out. It's their country. They're asking us to leave, and we insist on staying there. And why not get out? What harm is it going to do? Oh, you hear the statement, well, my God, the soldiers will have died in vain. The entire deaths of Vietnam died in vain. And they're dying in vain right this very second. You know what's worse than a soldier dying in vain is more soldiers dying in vain. That's
example of how Mike Gravel was a trailblazer. Here he is back in 2007 at the time for the 2008 Democratic primary on that stage discussing how the U.S. should not be in Iraq while being laughed at by the other candidates. So you have these people, whether it's a Mike Gravel, whether it's a Bernie Sanders, who've been consistently on the right side of history. No one takes them seriously, and it takes, the general public 20 plus years to finally acknowledge that these people were right at the time. Now, here's another example of that.
And I remember covering it. I remember talking to you back then. But what struck me most actually was the amused grin that the other candidates had. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden had on that debate stage. As you're saying things that are of great import and that you're clearly correct on, and they're looking at you like, get out of Iraq. We're not gonna do that. This talk of defense contractors controlling us because they give us millions of dollars in donations. Absurd, right?
The idea of somebody running for president and not running to win, but rather to carry a message onto the national platform, it's sort of absurd premise to that question that Brian Williams had. Maybe at that time there was, and particularly we've seen subsequent to that, half the people run in the Republican campaign as just a way of doing a book launch. Or to,
But
to build basically a 2 or 3 year scam.
But they don't say that they're not running to win.
Right.
So the media helps them uphold that fiction as opposed to Gravel being honest about what he was trying to do. It's certainly more noble than what you say. Running to increase your chances for higher office, maybe to be, if you're a representative, to be a senator, or to get a cushy lobbying job after you leave government, or to sell books. Yeah, I would say Gravel's purpose is certainly more noble than that.
I mean, when we talk about just sheer nobility, I'm not sure that running for as a message campaign isn't a more noble endeavor than actually running to become president in some instances. But be that as it may, rest in power, Mike Gravel. We should say, full disclosure, you did a video for the Gravel Institute.
I did.
I don't know.
Simple choice. We can have a democratic socialism of Bernie Sanders to benefit all Americans, or we can have Republican socialism, which benefits the 1% and leads us to a constant state of war.